Hello dear friends, today we're going to be doing some decoupage on eggs using napkins, and I'm really excited about this because it was something that I did a lot of when I was back home in South Africa. I used to sometimes do 300 or 400 hens eggs at a time, and I decorated ostrich eggs as well. So I have a long history with eggs, and maybe I'll tell you a little bit more as we go. But what we're going to need to begin with is we're going to need some egg shells, and we want to have blown the eggs out of that. And I have done a video on this, so I will put that up here for you to have a look at. It's quite easy, the method I've got, because you don't have to blow it with your mouth, which is always the yucky part. So these eggs have been blown and they have actually been cleaned. And then I have a variety of napkins. I love these ones with the feathers. I love the simplicity of it. I love the neutral colors. And if you wanted to, you've got the word Easter that you could use. I have an adorable napkin which I've used before to make ephemera with, but I've got a lovely little rabbit and squirrel and some mushrooms, quite nice sort of woodland pictures. And then I've got something which is butterflies. Now, bearing in mind this doesn't have to be just Easter, so we'll talk about the technique as we go along, but obviously the technique will be the same for all decoupage applications where you're working with napkins. So let me clear this space and I'll come back to you. So we're going to need a couple of basic things to be able to do our decoupage on our eggs. We've discussed the napkins, and we need to remove the backing ply from the napkins. So if you've not worked with napkins before, they've usually got 2 or 3 layers to them. Those are known as ply, and we really want to work with just the top layer so that the actual piece of paper is fairly thin and transparent, and if I was to put this over an egg, it would be easy to mold. The glue will also go through, so it will make it much easier for the process. So that's the napkins. We want to have some water because you don't want the glue drying on your brush. I like to work with my glue on a piece of laminated plastic. So I've got that because it allows me just to have a bit of a palette. And then you want to have some soft bristle brushes. These are Taklon brushes. Please don't use expensive brushes because often we just get them all gunked up. So you don't want to use watercolor brushes and things like that, but nice soft brushes so that you're not putting any little brush hairs through the actual fiber of your napkin, which is actually pretty delicate by the time you've come to take the pictures off. And then you're going to need something to glue down with. So you could use something like Elmer's glue, which works really well. You could use a matte medium, something like that, or you could actually use Mod Podge. So whatever your choice is, you're welcome to use those. Being very, very thin when you've actually taken the paper off here, you'll find that you're able to, first of all, tear it really nice and easily. I normally put one thumb firmly on the napkin and then use the other one just to tear up against my thumb so that I don't actually tear into my image. This way I'm able to get a little bit of a border around the edge, and this will just melt into the background once we start. It's a different process when you're working with a picture, something like a magazine picture, but let's just see how we go. So I'm just going to tear around this little rabbit, or the hare should I say, not really a rabbit. It's so delightful at work because we've just had a long wait for our baby goats to be born. They were meant to have been born at the beginning of March, and the farm animal manager tells me that normally they put the rams in with the ewes 3 times, and they had thought that they were going to have a lot of little kids at the beginning of the March month, but actually they only started arriving just the first week of April, so it was a long wait. So I've torn away my image here. I might actually decide that I want to just take away some of this line that's at the bottom. I don't mind a little bit, but it looks pretty linear compared to the naturalness of the actual hair. So I've got a nice little hair there. I'm going to tear out a few more images. I'll do some butterflies and some feathers, and then I'll come back to you when I've prepared them because you don't want to watch all that. Right, so you'll notice that I have collected a couple of little plates. Well, it was one little sort of small plate This is the lid from a container, and this is just a plastic tube from some kind of packaging, and I've collected those simply so I've got something to put my eggs on when they're damp, because otherwise you know what's going to happen, they're going to roll all over the place, and that makes for a disaster. I have separated my images that I want to use from the actual napkin, and I want to just show you that when you are choosing napkin images, choose carefully, because if you have a look at this one where there's a bit of white on there, once you actually start to put it over the egg, because the actual napkin paper, the tissue, is very sort of delicate and transparent, the color fades away and it's not that visible. Whereas if you've got something that has a printed color, oopsie, this one's folded over, such as that, you're going to get a stronger image. Likewise you will with that, but again with the white, it's going to sort of fade away a little bit. So just be mindful of that when you're choosing your images to go onto. So onto my piece of laminated plastic, I'm just going to squeeze some Elmer's glue. Make myself a little puddle. I just find it's easier to work with. Can top it up a little bit later if I need it. Before I start working, I like to wet my brush so that it is completely saturated, and this helps prevent all the glue drying along this metal edge, which is known as the ferrule. And I want to just wipe the glue off onto a piece of paper towel or a napkin. And now I'm going to decide which way I want to orientate my egg. I'm going to choose this way, and these eggs were blown, so they've got a hole at the top and a hole at the bottom, and it doesn't matter. And I'm going to just take my brush and apply a little bit of glue, and you can see how nice and thin the layer is, onto the actual shell of the egg. I'm going to use my napkin to pick up one of these, and I'm going to use a feather first because it's a fairly easy image. Now you want to make sure that you keep your bristles of your brush moist at all times, so I'm going to use the bristles gently to smooth over these edges, and I'm keeping them moist all the time. I'm trying not to handle it with my fingers, because there's a good chance if I do that I'm going to pull up the image that I've been trying to secure. And you'll see that because the napkin is so thin and delicate that it molds in really nicely. Once you've got it onto the surface, you'll find that the paper stretches ever so slightly, and you're able then just to go over and move any wrinkles out the way. So you can see that that's gone on really nicely. I'm now going to set that aside on my little saucer and leave it to dry. And if you wanted to put two images onto an egg, then let the one side dry completely first before you carry on with the other. I've wet my brush and dried it again, simply so the glue doesn't dry while I'm working. And this is a very sort of elongated egg, which is almost similar on both sides. It has got this ugly sort of red stamped mark, which I notice that some of the eggs have got these days. So I think I'm going to put my hair over this so that I don't see it. Because if you're putting this out on display for Easter or at any other time, you don't want an ugly red mark. I did try and remove it. And again, I'm going to pick up my hair and gently place this. So I just want to orientate it with the little hole that I've got at the bottom, making sure that the bristles of my brush are moist, gently brushing outwards from the center, and trying to secure as much as I can as quickly as I can. You can come back in. Oopsie. All right, so that's exactly what you don't want to do, is stretch it too much. So I'm going to remove this. I'll put another image on here for now, and we'll tear out another hair later. So that's a good thing to see, that actually you can remove these at some stage. I'm all for showing you all the things that I bloop rather than trying to edit them out. So I'm going to rinse my brush because it had a little bit of green color on there. All right, we'll just take a butterfly image for now. So I'm going to reapply the glue onto the egg. I'm going to pick up my butterfly image. It's got quite a nice sort of central point with the body of the butterfly. Gently brush outwards. Don't press down terribly hard. It's very delicate, so it's like doing it, stroking a cat, you know, gently and softly, not like playing with a dog, if you get my drift. All right, and that's gone down pretty easily. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside now to dry, I'm going to put that onto this little saucer, and give me a second while I just tear out another little hair. Right, so I have another little hair image. While I was tearing it out, my brush was in water once again, just so that the glue didn't dry. So I'm going to wipe that on some paper towel. I'm going to just swap over my little butterfly there, and I'm going to do exactly what I did before, was just to take some glue, paint it over this sort of red stamped image, like that. Pick up my hair, place him down, and using glue on my brush, gently brush it down. Decided to do the ears this time first, so that hopefully we don't run into any problems. Obviously, the larger the image, the more you'll have to just gently play with it. You might have noticed what I did there was gently just give it a little tug outwards, because the paper will stretch ever so slightly as it gets wet. It's going to want to sort of crinkle together here where the legs are. So we'll just try and maybe get this part flat first, all the way around there. Yep. And then I'm going to put a bit of extra glue just underneath this area, because I do want his little legs to run flat if possible. In fact, maybe the answer here is a small little snip. So just where the image is green here, lying up against the leg, I should have just torn this, but it's not going to matter too much if I can get it to snip. Yeah, this will just allow me to be flexible with how I lay this down. A little bit more. So those of you that are dressmakers will know exactly what I'm doing here. It's like trying to fit a sleeve into an armhole. So I've got the legs lying down now, and now I'm going to put a little bit of glue here and get the feet to come over the leg like that, so it's in front, and that will be absolutely perfect. Right, I can maybe just wiggle it down a little bit. So we've got our little egg covered now with our nice little hair, and we're going to set these aside to dry. And when we've finished, you can either just leave them natural, or you could actually put some varnish on, and you could certainly put a little clasp here to hang them if you wished. So I'll be back with you once they've actually dried. I've left my eggs for approximately an hour to dry, and it is an important thing that you let your images dry 100%. If you don't do that, what happens is that you'll get little pockets of moisture on your image or underneath your image, and then when you come to varnish over them, it leaves this kind of little opaque film, which is a bit unsightly. Having looked at my images now as they dried, I feel that they are quite flat against the eggshell. I don't want to varnish the whole egg and make the whole thing glossy, but I am going to actually use some accent on there. So you could use something like a dimensional accent like that, or you could use something like this, which is a high gloss varnish, and this is the one that I'm going to use. One of the things when you come to use these varnishes is don't shake them. You shake them, you'll get bubbles, and bubbles will not be so wonderful to have. So what I'm going to do first of all is again just dip my brush in some water to prevent my ferrules getting all clogged up here, and I'm going to work quite carefully just on this section where the butterfly is. I'm not going to use much of this varnish at all, so I'm just going very, very carefully with very little on my brush. I can always come back and do a second coat if I haven't applied it evenly, but I'm just trying to stay right on the image as such. And then I'm going to set that aside and leave it to dry. I'm going to do the same thing with all of my other images, and some of the images, some of the eggs I've put more than one image on, so there's one on the front and one on the back, and I will do the one side, leave it to dry, and then do the second side when this is completely dried off. So you'll see it's a very, very easy application. and it shouldn't take more than about half an hour for that to dry off. Right, so we'll do this little feather first. And you just follow the line of your image. Doesn't matter if it is slightly rounded, like this one I'm going to do slightly rounded because it is a slightly rounded shape, well, slightly oval, should I say. You want to avoid getting any hard edges along the sides. Like here, there's a little bit of a thickness of the varnish. I'm just going to thin that down a little bit. There we go. Set that aside to dry, and then I'll show you what they look like once they've dried completely. Having given the varnish about an hour to dry, you'll see that it's lifted the color nicely and it's given it a bit of a sheen without actually affecting the natural color of the eggshell around it. Obviously you could varnish the whole egg if you wish to. It's a little bit more tricky. You need to make some kind of a stand to support it so that you don't get finger marks. But I'm very happy with those, and I think that they'll be a very nice addition in amongst an Easter basket, or even just as decorations. Thank you for joining me. If you've enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up and please consider subscribing to my channel. Bye for now.